I spent most of that evening sitting on the patio. The sun was low on the horizon and painted everything with a golden hue. Dana was in the kitchen. I believe her little namesake was here. I could hear them periodically laughing. I was just laying out my notebook to write, when Jesse came by. He sat across from me and asked, "Dad, would you like to go on an adventure?" I was just on one. "What did you have in mind?" "Trust me, you will enjoy yourself." He reached down to his side and picked up a suitcase and handed it over. It contained leather hiking boots, work dungarees, and a hat. "Bring these," he said. "Are we traveling up the Amazon?" "Maybe, if we're lucky." I grilled him for an hour regarding the adventure, but he held his own. He asked me to be ready in the morning and he would come by and get me. I agreed. It would be good to spend time with him. He showed up late morning. I was up and dressed at least 3 hours earlier. I expected him to come by much earlier. "I expected you'd be here 3 hours ago." "What happened?" "Father, I assumed you sleepers slept in until noon or early evening." "No, we don't." "Okay, it's been a long time since I've slept. Actually, I was with the boys putting down some new music. I lost track of time. I'm sorry." "No need to be sorry. Are we ready to go?" "Yeah." Jesse had a transport waiting for us, and we were off. We arrived in a small dusty town on the planet Serengeti called Vumbi. It means dusty in Swahili. Jesse explained that a few hundred people, adventurers, assembled on the 10th of every odd month in the tavern of the Hotel Kupumzika, meaning restful. The hotel only had 30 rooms, but its tavern could cater to over 300 people. We exited the transport vehicle with our gear at the opposite end of town. A donkey, a cow, and a few monkeys were the only living creatures present upon our arrival. The road leading up to the small, primitive, dusty hotel turned out to be heavy dust or deep mud puddles. Today it was pothole dust. I sneezed a few times and stumbled over my feet twice, and that was just getting out of the vehicle. Along the road were only 2 other buildings beside the hotel at the other end of town. The buildings were more like dusty huts, with a grass-covered stall attached to one building where the donkey lived. The monkeys ran into the jungle. The donkey turned away, and the cow came up looking for a handout. So, I patted her on the head. I was not expecting a reception, but thank you. I wondered why anyone wanted to come to this dirty little town. "Jesse, why would anyone come here?" "It's not as awful as your first impression, Father. Though the hotel is small, and the township is made of dust, the tavern with its remote location makes it preferable for the adventurer's purpose. Because it's secluded, it does not fill up with the public. 300 adventurers need to squeeze into the tavern at one time. If the public were to invade, the crowd would overwhelm the tavern." "What are the adventures?" "Most of them are involved in the adventure, Dad." I was feeling suspicious. He was being evasive, but I was forming an idea what this adventure actually was, but I didn't press it. I just went along. I followed Jesse up to the old ramshackle hotel. As we entered, I read a handwritten sign next to the front doors that read "Best Food in Town." I turned to look behind me, and then at the cow, and thought, lucky for you we don't eat meat. Once inside, it was a different story. As we approached a wide counter made of high-polished mahogany, I could see our reflection in the front veneer. The floors of the hotel appeared to be rough walnut planks. They revealed their age from years of wear and tear, but were carefully kept. Even though the windows were dirty, it impressed me how rustic it was. Everything had to be a throwback to another time. You could smell it, feel it, and see it. I asked, "Did we just go through a time warp?" "It feels like it, doesn't it?" "Yeah?" "No, we didn't go through a time warp, although Jack told me about your experiences at the cabin. That must have been disturbing." "Not so much now that I understand what's going on." "Oh. That's good. Then I think you won't have a problem with what we're about to do." "What do you mean?" "Honestly, I expect you will figure it out as we go along. So, just let it come to you." "All right, I'm trusting you. You know me well enough to know that I don't really like surprises." Father, where are you? I'm with you. In Sierra. Oh, got it. We walked up to the counter and set our gear down. Just as we did, a savvy young man, sporting a tall red hat, asked us our names. Jesse responded with our last name as the young man stood straight up and promptly wrote them down in the log. He came across as alert and astute, even though he looked to be in high school. He asked Jesse, "What can I do for you, Mr. Flake?" I reserved a room, and I was wondering if it's too early to have access to the room. "No sir, check-in was an hour ago, at noon." He lifted a set of keys off a hook behind him and handed them to Jesse. Afterward, he turned around to a wall of wooden cubby holes, pulled a note from one of them and handed it to Jesse. "There was a message that came in for you this morning, Mr. Flake." It read, "I will be there tomorrow should you need a map reader, John." Jesse wrote, "Yes" on the back of the note and gave it back to the clerk. He told him when the man showed up to return the note to him. The clerk slapped his hand down on a bell. Shortly after that, a bellhop wearing a similar red hat came dashing around the corner from the right of the reception desk. He seized our bags and said, "Follow me, please." There were stairways 10 feet from the reception desk on either side, leading up to the second floor. The bellhop took the stairs to the right. We followed as he led us down the hall, 4 doors to the right. He let us in, abandoned our gear, tipped his hat, and said, "Good day, mates," and left. He barely gave us time to say thank you. The room had 2 single beds. They didn't look too comfortable. Although the room was adequately kept, except for the windows, like the rest of the hotel from what I have observed so far. The bathroom was cramped. I guess it was a place to sleep. For me anyway. I guess the room was for my sake. Jesse didn't need to sleep, so he probably didn't need a room for himself. Jesse said, "Let's get lunch." Sounds good to me. I haven't eaten breakfast yet, so I'm hungry. We returned downstairs and continued down a hall to the left, which led to the tavern. The tavern was large compared to the hotel. Ironically, that made sense because the hotel was out of place for the small dusty town. The tavern could hold 300 people, 200 on the main floor, and another 100 up on a balcony. Old wooden, nicked up, well-worn tables were placed close to one another from one end of the room to the other. It was dusty, most of which was in the air, as I could taste it and see the particles floating against the sunlight coming through the dirty windows. We sat at a small table near one of those dirt-painted windows. "Dad, I'm sure you don't remember, but I'm certain you like the fish, the Geelbeck. You like it because it doesn't have a strong fishy flavor, and they cook it with mushrooms and tomatoes. You should order that." "Excellent, you can order for both of us." Along with lunch, Jesse ordered a famous drink called Hard Apple. One drink and it cleaned my sinuses. It was viciously strong and a bit like a well-aged high-proof rum, although it had no alcohol. Afterward, it left an aftertaste of an apple in your mouth. It was the most popular drink among the adventurers. When I took my first drink, it filled my mind with pictures of sitting at these very tables with Jesse and my grandkids. I liked it, but hard drinks and food have never sat well with me. "May I have a soda, please?" We ate lunch, which was interesting. I didn't care for the fish. Perhaps I would have to try it a few times before I made that decision, I suppose. "What do we do now, Jess? Take a nap?" "I'm not used to you being a sleeper, Father. Anyway, it's almost 3 p.m. It won't be too long before the adventurers fill the tavern. If we leave, there's no guarantee that we will get a good table later when the activities start." I asked, "Where do all these people, adventurers, stay? If this hotel doesn't have room for everyone, do they stay in another hotel?" I didn't see any other hotels, or even large buildings when we landed. Even though Vumbi has a population of several monkeys, a donkey, a cow, and 6 hotel staff, it's not as remote as it appears. 10 miles to the east of us is the tremendous city of Abidjan. Abidjan is a big metropolitan city. I believe the population of the city and surrounding neighborhoods is like 1.5 million. Most of the adventurers stay there. I like to stick around here. I have stayed at Abidjan enough times to learn the city thoroughly, but I'm usually late for adventure meetings when I stay there. So, I spend the night here, so I don't end up standing all night. So, you actually get a room, even when I'm not here? Yeah, but I don't sleep in it. It gives me a place to go that's nearby. I usually hang out in the room and read. I usually start camping at a table around 3 p.m. That makes sense. Standing room only, eh? And, what about this city you mentioned? You'll see, Dad. If you like, we can go to Abidjan once we have a quest. Okay. So, we sat and counted dust particles as others came in and took the remaining seats. Men and women assembled in the rustic tavern throughout the afternoon. Many sat around visiting and partaking of their favorite rough and tumble drink. By early evening, it turned into a standing room only event, and I understood what Jesse meant. Most of the participants were rough-looking, sporting shabby clothes, and goofy-looking hats, just like the one Jesse gave me. Several of the men's faces were covered with wrinkles, scars, and unkempt beards. Some women sported wild hairstyles, and one woman wore a patch over her eye. Losing an eye cannot happen in Sierra. Jesse said, we dress up because it's part of the game. Zoe, the woman with the eye patch, lost her eye about 6 quests ago. She kept the patch because she thinks it gives her a unique look. We have to look authentic, Father. The other adventurers I talked with were nice, ready to give me advice. I could tell it was a friendly group. They all knew each other well. I didn't realize we sat there for so long, but around 6 p.m., an angel walked up to a stage and called the room to order. In the front of the main floor was a small half-round stage, butted up against the wall. When the time came, that large angel stood at the podium where he introduced other angels to join him, 77 in all, and one by one to give out an equal number of quests. In the beginning, before Sierra was fully operational, a watcher asked the officials in Jerusalem if he could develop these quests for entertainment. Watcher, Aaron Levy, planned and organized the first one to show Jerusalem how the quests worked. Aaron was an experienced Spanish explorer on Earth back in the 1700s. While leading an expedition into the Yucatan Peninsula, in Mexico, he discovered an old Mayan temple. As the group was measuring its size, he and everyone with him vanished when they walked out over a cenote. The ground gave way from their combined weight, and everyone in the expedition drowned. Their skeletons were discovered 50 years later when another explorer found the same temple. Aaron gave a great deal of attention to his proposal, as he spent years perfecting the first one. When he presented it to Jerusalem, they enthusiastically approved his request. They were impressed with his presentation and assigned several thousand angels to help with the program's creation. The idea has expanded throughout the other 41 inhabited regions. Aaron will always hold the title Master of Adventure. Other adventurers recognized him as the highest-ranking adventurer in the entire universe. Each quest took place on one of the thousands of uninhabitable planets, ones with livable conditions, but not in sync with the habitable planets. Angels built whole civilizations to mimic ancient, modern, and futuristic societies. The angels could build a nation, a complete society in a couple of weeks with incredible detail. It took some time to develop a quest and make it authentic. Quests were only given out every other month, on the 10th, to allow for the story, the design, and the construction. Every quest involved a secret artifact or discovery that needed retrieval or resolution. For example, one group needed to recover a crystal globe, which was a centerpiece for the power source for an empire's major dam. A group of men from the neighboring empire stole it. The crystal was essential as it provided the crucial links to 4 different shield generators which prevented the dam from breaking and could only be removed for a short period for cleaning. It needed restoration within the following 30 days. Otherwise, the dam would rupture and destroy the city below. Another example, an expedition was required to figure out what caused an entire city of 10,000 people to become suspended in time. The group needed to figure out several riddles and defeat several beasts to solve the quest. They were given 3 weeks to achieve their task. Otherwise, the people would never escape their status and subsequently disappear into eternity. Although these adventures might sound dangerous, no one ever died, as it was more like virtual reality, except you physically traveled to your location. If you perished in the quest, you were returned to the Hotel Cupumzica, and the quest was over for you. Both angels and companions became engaged as characters within the quests. Specials could not handle the complexities of a quest because they were too single-minded. They could not think far outside their programming, so companions made up most of the quest sectors. The information regarding the quests was fed into the companion hive, and they chose for themselves whether to get involved with a particular quest. With over 2 billion CAIs living in the hive, quests, sponsors, and developers had no problem finding characters. Once they released the information into the hive, it only took a few minutes to collect the needed characters. Often, 200,000 or 300,000 companions or more might activate for a single quest to make up whole civilizations. In minutes they might create a 10,000-man Roman army, or 200,000 inhabitants for an entire country. Imagination was the only limit. To the companions, it was like playing a multiplayer game, and they didn't make it comfortable for anyone either. For the highly complex quests, angels played the primary roles as characters. Those were the tough ones to accomplish. It's one thing to outmaneuver a companion, but another thing to bamboozle an angel. Nearly inconceivable. What they found interesting was when the developers reported the companions not involved in a particular quest were following the quests while in the hive. Even more startling was idle companions made up and submitted scenarios for future quests. After explaining all of that to me, Jesse told me, at the other end of the hotel, opposite from the inn, was a sitting room. The whole room was a transporter used to transport teams with their equipment to the area of the quest. It was the same room you returned to should you die during the adventure. Then he described how each quest contained diverse levels of complexity. An adventurer might receive a fair amount of intelligence for a quest, but more than often, they needed to figure everything out. To be fair to different people with different levels of experience, they created separate categories of quests, ones for the beginners, the greenhorns, and to the experienced masters. If it was your first adventure, you were a greenhorn. Then after greenhorn, you were a 0 until you accomplished 10 quests. Then, you become a 10, a 20, and so on until you reached 60. When you have over 60 quests under your belt, you are a Jones. I wondered again if anyone in Sierra had a sense of originality. You were a Jones from 60 through 100 quests, and once you reached 100, they considered you a master. Jesse was a Jones because of the 80 quests he completed. So, he was an accomplished team leader, so were his boys. As Jesse was explaining the different levels, it all came crashing back into my mind. That's when someone familiar walked across the front of the room. I almost called out to him, thinking it was my friend John from the Jade Coast. I recalled that John was an adventurer and was probably standing around somewhere in the tavern. It wasn't him, but someone who looked like him. His memory caused me to be disoriented for a few minutes, knowing I remembered someone whom I have not seen since I arrived in Sierra. Often, the memories filling my head made me think I had a split personality, perhaps schizophrenia. I suspected if I was immortal, I would know how to deal with these things, but I'm somewhere in between living both lives. I didn't feel bad, but occasionally, those other memories were startling. My friend John was also an artist called a carver, and some carvers were like adventures in that finding their raw materials can be a quest by itself. Jesse, have you seen John? Is he here for the quests? Oh, I'm supposed to say hi to you for him. I talked to him a couple of days ago. He said he couldn't make it because he and the boys were going ruby hunting up in the Steel Islands before winter set in. By the way, Dad, hi, from John. That boy of mine, he's just too funny. He and John often shared quests. At around 7 p.m., the head angel called the lead angels of each quest up to the stage, and each gave a brief introduction regarding the said quest. Interested adventurers, based on their experience, put their name in a hat. When all the interested parties, for the current quest, put their name in the hat, they drew one name. 77 quests are given out at each meeting. I sensed we were in for a long night. The process went into the early hours of the morning. Once the last quest was taken, everyone headed for bed, well, those who slept. I don't know where the rest of them went. I got to bed 12 hours after taking our seats in the tavern. Jesse stayed downstairs to talk with friends. The next morning, the hotel filled up as the quest leaders organized their teams. Teams might include 2 to 30 adventurers. Each team needed an archaeologist, a linguist, a map reader, trackers, protection, cooks for a large expedition. In addition, each team included a writer, a photographer, and video professional to record the quest. Those 3 people are exempt from any form of danger the quest might present, and they survive no matter what until the quest succeeded or failed. The photos, recordings, and books, along with the artifacts, were displayed in the adventurer museums throughout Sierra. Also, they made them available to the public and were very popular. I asked Jesse, why do some teams only included a few people? That's because the more experienced adventurers are capable of filling all the different positions within a group, so there is no need for too many participants. I was at the lowest skill level, a greenhorn, a greenhorn's greenhorn. I enjoyed absolutely no natural qualifications in this kind of situation, as I'm both slow thinking and acting. Apparently, and I gave it some thought, this was my first time joining a team. At least I didn't recall doing this before. I asked Jesse, and he said, I've been after you to join me for decades. These quests have been going on for at least 150 years. I don't know why, but I have been able to avoid them all that time, and I know Jesse can be persuasive. So, the little rascal caught me off balance, playing to my insanity, strumming my ignorance, taking advantage of my condition, the little rat. Not all adventurers received a quest, but most joined a team with no problem. Many of the masters went home if they didn't get one. I said, see you, as 2 masters walked out the hotel door. Both looked back at me, grinning. I heard one of them say something about the color green as the door closed behind them. Maybe his lawn needed mowing. I'm sure he was going home to cut the grass. Jesse got one requiring at least a team of 20 people. So, on the second day, he assembled the team, including John as the map reader. Afterward, he handed out our assignments. Well, duties for those who don't know what they're doing. Honestly, I overheard him make only one assignment. Feeling special, he entrusted me to assist the archaeologist, certain I'm supposed to carry his equipment. I appreciate my son meant well. Fortunately, I didn't have to carry any heavy provisions as companions did most of the heavy work. If the group included over 10, several companions joined to carry the gear, food, tents, etc., but not always. Their degree of involvement depended on the criteria of the quest. Once Jesse put his team together, he walked up to the young clerk at the reception counter and told him we're ready. Then, he told the young man to call his name in the afternoon the next day. I forgot he planned to show me around Abidjan. Jesse told the rest of the team, we'll be leaving tomorrow at 2 in the afternoon. It was 10 a.m., so it would be a little over 28 hours before we left. The plan was acceptable to the team, and the team split up to go their separate ways, except for John. John was going to Abidjan with us. Abidjan turned out to be a uniquely beautiful city. One would think they arrived in Egypt. In the center of the town, they built a great pyramid, with a walkway wrapped around leading all the way to the top. There was a garden on top in which to sit and gaze over the whole city while listening to a group of African musicians playing beautiful African music. What impressed me most were the clothes, notably how the women dressed. I have seen African robes before, but I'd never have expected to see such colorful ones, with such noble turbans worn high from the head. I stared transfixed by all the colors against their lovely black skin. Each young woman moved or walked with such grace. If I said anything about my first impression of Abidjan, it would be colorful. Abidjan had blocks of skyscrapers crowding its central downtown area and surrounding the Great Pyramid, all of them with landing pads for transport vehicles as none were allowed on the streets below. Instead, an antique trolley system delivered us from place to place around the city. While wandering around, I recalled all the fountains I have seen over the last several months. Then I thought if I said anything about my first impression of Sierra, it would be fountains. Abidjan was no exception, except the fountains in Abidjan were much larger than most. And like most fountains you discover anywhere, they were full of children swimming with parents lounging on park benches keeping an eye on them. Fountains are conduits to a tranquil soul. So, I'm not objecting. We picked out a modest restaurant. We ate jollof rice and mekui, roasted lamb, for lunch. After lunch, we continued to walk around. While doing so, the sky clouded up quickly. It rained heavily for 10 minutes. Those without umbrellas headed for cover in the buildings and plaza entryways. If you didn't have an umbrella and you couldn't get to cover fast enough, you got soaked. The clouds dissipated as fast as they came. As the rain evaporated, a mist rose from the hot cement and the tops of the buildings. The pyramid looked like a cloud. It was so thick you couldn't see your feet on the ground. The smell of the rain was carried in the mist as we walked through town. I could have stopped in place for a long time, breathing in the aroma. Often, when a moment like that takes place, it suspends you in time, and everything else fades away. We visited the shops and talked with all the people. We returned to the hotel later in the evening. Abidjan was a splendid modern city. I considered how incredible it has been to travel to the places I have over the last several months, with each new place being more impressive than the last. Sharing them with my children was more important than anything else. Jesse and I spent the rest of the evening down in the little inn. John remained in Abidjan, so he didn't come back with us. A group of adventurers were sitting around, and we struck up a conversation. Jesse knew them and introduced me. "Dad, this is Melvin, Peter, and Paul Lardy." Everyone said their hellos. "Glad to meet you." First thing Melvin asked, "Jesse, how big a quest did you get?" "I got a 20-man quest, you?" "Mine is 10, and I have 8 days to accomplish it. I am required to finish mine in 24 days. Good for you. Will this be 81 for you?" "Yep. It won't be long before you will have to call me master." We visited with the group for 2 hours. The 3 of them were brothers from Missouri, who survived most of the tribulation by hiding up in the Ozark mountain range. The brothers were teenagers when the rapture took place. To avoid being drafted into the Antichrist's military, they escaped into the Ozarks. While there, they found a prepper's underground facility, with no sign about what happened to the prepper. The facility was well stocked and could have supported at least 10 people for years. While out scouting one day, Peter came across a starving family. He could not turn them away and brought them back to the underground facility. The family turned out to be Christians. It was one thing to be hiding from the world government and even worse if you confessed to be a Christian. Officials loved to show you to the world and execute you in front of the masses, especially if you refused to renounce Christ. All 3 boys accepted Christ because of that family. 4 years into the tribulation, the government captured the whole group and executed them at a public square in St. Louis on live television. It impressed me at the courage so many people had during that horrible time, but unfortunately for many, they didn't find Christ before the tribulation. They would have avoided so much agony. After their story, it seemed like we had become good friends. It was too funny. They found my story equally impressive, even though it read safe and simple. I could never imagine what they went through. Yet they stood strong until the end. They called Jesse's team the next afternoon while I was putting on my adventure's clothes. Once assembled, we entered the transport room, and we transported to our destination. Upon arrival, things got crazy. I didn't last over 5 minutes. As soon as we landed, a band of native scouts attacked us. I along with John the map reader and 2 companions died instantly, receiving for my trouble an arrow to the center of my back. It hurt for a moment, then nothing. I felt bad for John. He struggled to look after me and received 2 arrows to the chest and 1 in the head for his effort. He looked strange with that arrow sticking out of his head. It caused him to go cross-eyed. We launched back to the transport room along with others who didn't last long in their quests either. John laughed and got up to shake my hand. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Jeff. Hopefully, we will share another quest in the future." "Perhaps, but who will map read this one?" "No problem. Jesse is an excellent map reader." He waved and walked out of the room. I thought, Happy hunting, Jess. That was my encounter with quests. The next morning, like other mornings when not finding fascinating places to go or wonderful people to see, I struck up conversations with Dana. Often Bart joined in as both migrated to the kitchen during the early morning. Dana often filled me in how things were before my transformation. Yet, she was always prudent not to tell me or show me anything not permitted. Also, it proved to be too hard to carry on a conversation when I couldn't understand half of what she said. I walked into town twice, spending the day sitting in the park and meandering around with the other tourist. It was a beautiful little seaside tourist town. It was often full of people shopping while eating ice cream, me particularly. "I am sorry. Let me clean that up," was how I usually greeted my friends and shop owners. I loved watching how the kids and companions got along. I walked up into the neighborhood in the hills outside of town, twice. One particular house had a fountain in the front yard. The fountain, besieged by a small stone patio, was striking. It was skirted by rhododendrons, red, yellow, and white ones. A small table sat on the cobblestone patio with a few wrought iron chairs next to it. I don't know what possessed me, but I took a seat in a chair, then plucked a sandwich from my pocket, a tuna sandwich I got from the lunch truck. Kids came rushing out of the house and stood around me. None of them said anything while unflinchingly staring at me. Mother soon pursued. She sat in one of the other chairs across from me. "Would you like a drink with your sandwich?" "Yes, that would be great." How odd of me to do such a thing. I felt genuinely like a vagabond. She brought back a soda, gave it to me, and sat back down. Alice and I talked for a while, about the town, her kids, and her husband's work. Apparently, he was one of the artisans, a glassblower, who owned a shop down near the beach. I didn't recall his name when she told me, which caused me to feel awful. I planned to stop in and tell him what a nice family he has. We had an enjoyable conversation, and I told her I was infatuated with her fountain and patio. I could not resist taking a seat. She told me I wasn't the first vagabond to do so. "Please take sanctuary there any time you like. Just ignore the kids, and they will eventually get distracted by something else and leave you alone." I laughed, stood up, and said, "See you later, and thank you for your hospitality. I'll stop in and meet your husband, especially since I admire blown glass art." As I continued walking around, I observed that the neighborhood was overcrowded with mansions. Everyone lived too close together for my liking. I met several other people who lived in the neighborhood, and on 3 distinct occasions, I was invited to lunch by others who I didn't know or remember. I got home early in the evening, sat by the fire to read my Bible, and write in my notebook. Afterward, I watched the stars from my cubby by the window. Only one dull moon crept out that night. It didn't have sufficient light to block the stars from shining. I could see waves of stars as if racing across the night sky. The park beside the house looked mysterious. Several cats ran in and out of the shadows, looking like little monstrous beings throughout the night. I heard infrequent meows, repeatedly coming from the same area of a pair of glowing eyes, which looked like binary stars against the darkness. I feared those darn cats might be up to no good. One sizable black cat came up to the window and arched its back as if to tell me to let him in. Shrieking, I said, "No way am I getting out of bed, you silly cat." It must have heard me as it ran back into the shadows of the park. After chasing that cat off, I watched the stars until I fell asleep,